David thought 2026 would finally be his year. New goals. New mindset. New promises to himself. But on the second night of January, he found a note taped to his apartment door. 3 words. You're running out. No name. No explanation. And what happened next forced him to question everything he believed about himself, because someone seemed to know every mistake he had ever buried, and the truth was only beginning to surface. At first, David laughed it off. Probably some cruel prank. Maybe a neighbor trying to scare him. But later that night, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. The message read, "You said 2025 would change your life too." David froze. How could a stranger know that? Who was watching him closely enough to know the promises he never told anyone? That's when the fear stopped feeling imaginary. David had spent years pretending he was fine. Fine at work. Fine with friends. Fine with family. But deep down, he knew the truth. He was stuck. Every dream he once cared about had slowly turned into excuses. And now, somehow, somebody knew it. The worst part. A tiny voice inside him whispered something terrifying. Maybe he deserved this. Before we go further, take 1 second to like the video and subscribe. Because this story isn't just about David. It's about anyone who's ever looked in the mirror and wondered if they wasted another year. And trust me, what David discovers next might change the way you see your own future, because nobody was prepared for what happened after midnight. At exactly 12:03 a.m., another message arrived. Check your closet. David stared at the screen. His stomach tightened. Slowly, he walked across the room. The closet door was slightly open. He knew for a fact he had shut it earlier. Inside, hanging from a single wire hanger, was the suit he wore to his father's funeral. But that wasn't the disturbing part. In the pocket of the suit jacket was a folded photograph. David unfolded it carefully. It was a picture of him from 5 years ago. Smiling. Confident. Alive. Across the image, written in red ink. This version of you is disappointed. David's hand started shaking. Who could have taken this picture? And why did it feel less like a threat, and more like a warning? The next morning, David skipped work. For the first time in months, he sat alone without distractions. No music. No TV. No scrolling. Just silence. And in that silence, memories returned. The business idea he abandoned. The relationship he sabotaged. The promises he made to himself every New Year's Eve. Was someone exposing him, or was he finally confronting himself? That afternoon, David noticed something strange. Everywhere he went, clocks seemed frozen at the exact same time. 11:11. At the grocery store. Inside his Uber. Even on a broken billboard downtown. Coincidence? Maybe. But then he received another text. Time notices what you ignore. And suddenly, the city around him felt different, colder somehow. David decided to fight back. He called the number. No answer. Again. Nothing. Then finally, breathing. Heavy breathing. A voice whispered one sentence before hanging up. You're not afraid of failure, David, you're afraid of trying again. He nearly dropped the phone. Because deep inside, he knew that voice was right. That night, David couldn't sleep. He kept replaying every regret like scenes from a movie he hated watching. What happened to the ambitious guy everyone believed in? When did survival replace purpose? Then came another message. Tomorrow. 6 p.m. Your old high school gym. No explanation. Just a location connected to memories David spent years trying to escape. The gym smelled exactly the same. Dust. Sweat. Old wood floors. David stood frozen near the entrance. This was where he once dreamed big. Back when he believed effort could change everything. Then he saw it. At center court sat a single chair. And taped to it, another note. You stopped believing after the loss. David's chest tightened instantly. Most people never knew what happened during David's senior year. He had one shot at a scholarship. One game. One moment. And he failed. The missed shot haunted him for years. After that night, he stopped taking risks altogether. But how did this stranger know details nobody talked about anymore? That question became impossible to ignore. Under the chair was an old cassette tape. David found a dusty player in the storage room and pressed play. Static filled the gym. Then, his father's voice. "David, if you're hearing this, it means you still don't understand what failure is." David's eyes widened. His father had died 3 years earlier. So who recorded this, and why now? The recording continued. "You think one bad moment destroyed your future. But your real mistake came after. You quit on yourself." David felt tears building. Because deep down, he knew it was true. He had spent years blaming the world. Blaming luck. Blaming fear. Anything except the one person responsible. Himself. Then the tape suddenly glitched. A second voice appeared. Not his father's. "David, if you came here alone, you already failed again." He spun around. Nobody there. But near the exit doors, a shadow moved. Someone had been watching him the entire time, and that's when everything spiraled out of control. David chased the figure into the parking lot. Rain hammered the pavement. The stranger disappeared between two abandoned buildings. David followed, until he found a wall covered in photographs. Hundreds of them. Pictures of him eating alone. Working late. Staring blankly at his phone. Years of his life documented in silence. But one photo changed everything. It was dated December 31st, 2025. Yesterday. In the picture, David sat alone at midnight while fireworks exploded outside his apartment window. Written beneath it. "This is the night you decided to disappear." Disappear. What did that mean? Was someone predicting his future? Or had David already become invisible long before he realized it? Suddenly, his phone rang again. The same unknown number. "Look behind you." David turned slowly. Nobody. Then he noticed something hanging from a fire escape ladder above him. A mirror. And spray painted across the glass. "Who are you without excuses?" David couldn't look away, because for the first time in years, he didn't have an answer. The next few days changed him. David started waking up early. Going to the gym again. Writing down goals. Small things. But every time he made progress, another mysterious message appeared. Almost like someone was testing him. Good. But discipline matters when motivation dies. Whoever this person was, they weren't trying to destroy him anymore. Weeks passed. David became obsessed with discovering the truth. He checked security cameras. Tracked phone records. Questioned neighbors. Nothing. It was like the stranger didn't exist. Then came the biggest shock yet. The phone company traced the unknown number back to David's own account. Impossible. Unless someone much closer was involved. David rushed home and searched through old storage boxes. That's when he found it. A second phone. His old phone from years ago. Dead battery. Cracked screen. But when he plugged it in, dozens of scheduled messages appeared. Messages written by him. To himself. David stared in horror. Had he been orchestrating this entire nightmare all along? The messages were dated months earlier. Back when David hit his lowest point. One video file stood out. Hands trembling, he pressed play. On screen was a version of himself he barely recognized. Exhausted. Broken. Angry. Future David spoke directly into the camera. "If you're watching this, it means you almost gave up again." The video continued. "I knew you'd forget who you are. So I created something impossible to ignore." David felt sick. Every note. Every message, every clue. It had all been designed by him during a moment of desperation. But there was one final sentence in the video that changed everything. And if you still refuse to fight for your life, open the red envelope. David searched the apartment frantically until he found it hidden beneath his bed. A sealed red envelope. Inside was a letter. But it wasn't motivational. It wasn't hopeful. It was terrifying. If nothing changes by June 2026, you won't survive what's coming. David's heart pounded violently. What did that even mean? And why did future David sound so certain? Attached to the letter was a hospital bracelet. David's name. A future date. June 18, 2026. His breathing became uneven. Was this some elaborate psychological breakdown? Or had his future self truly seen something catastrophic ahead? One line on the back of the bracelet made his blood run cold. You still have time to become someone worth saving. For the first time in years, David stopped running from discomfort. He apologized to people he hurt. Applied for opportunities he was afraid of. Started rebuilding his health. And slowly, life responded. Not perfectly. Not magically. But differently. Still, one mystery remained unsolved. Why did future David sound so afraid? Then came the third month of 2026. David received no more messages. Silence. At first, it felt peaceful. But then anxiety crept in. Had he passed some kind of test? Or was something worse approaching? That question haunted him every night, until a stranger appeared outside his workplace holding a familiar photograph. The stranger introduced himself quietly. My name is Marcus. I knew your father. David's stomach dropped instantly. Marcus handed him a box filled with old journals. Your father wanted you to have these when you were ready. Inside the first journal was a sentence underlined 3 times. Fear becomes destiny when ignored. David suddenly realized this story had started long before 2026. According to the journals, David's father had struggled with the exact same fears. Missed opportunities. Self-doubt. Years wasted hiding from failure. But one entry stood out. I pray David never inherits my habit of quitting. David couldn't breathe for a moment. Because that was exactly what happened, and maybe it had been happening for generations. Marcus revealed one final secret. The cassette tape in the gym. David's father recorded it shortly before his death. He feared David was slowly giving up on life emotionally. So he created a plan with Marcus, a last attempt to wake his son up someday. But Marcus admitted something disturbing next. The later messages weren't from me. David stared at him. If you didn't send them, who did? Marcus looked genuinely shaken. I thought you were sending those yourself. Silence filled the room. Because that meant someone else had entered the game. Someone who knew intimate details about David's fears. Someone still watching him even now, and suddenly the danger felt real again. That night, David returned home cautiously. The apartment lights were already on. He knew he turned them off before leaving. Slowly, he stepped inside. Nothing seemed stolen. But on the kitchen table sat a fresh note. You're finally becoming the man you were supposed to be. And underneath it, a key David had never seen before. The key led to an abandoned storage unit across town. David almost didn't go. But curiosity pulled harder than fear. Inside the unit were shelves filled with videotapes, notebooks, and calendars documenting his life since childhood. Then he noticed the date stopped abruptly in June 2026. The exact same month from the hospital bracelet. Why would the record suddenly end there? At the back of the storage room sat an old television. A tape was already loaded inside. David pressed play. Static flickered. Then a hooded figure appeared on screen. You think this story is about survival? It isn't. David's pulse raced. The figure leaned closer to the camera. It's about whether you finally become someone you respect before time runs out. The figure continued speaking calmly. Most people die long before their bodies do. David felt chills crawl down his spine. Because he understood exactly what that meant. Years of numb routines. Fear disguised as comfort. Dreams buried quietly over time. Had he already been emotionally dead for years without realizing it? Then the hooded figure removed the mask. David gasped. It was him. Older. Tired. Scar above his eyebrow he didn't yet have. Future David stared directly into the camera. I couldn't stop the accident. But I could stop you from wasting the time before it. David's knees nearly collapsed, because suddenly everything felt terrifyingly real. Future David explained that the hospital bracelet was real. A car accident in June 2026 nearly killed him. But lying in that hospital bed forced him to confront one horrifying truth. His biggest regret wasn't failure. It was never fully living before disaster struck. And he refused to let his younger self repeat that mistake. You keep waiting to feel ready, Future David said. But confidence comes after action, not before it. David watched silently, tears forming. Every excuse he ever made suddenly sounded weak. How many years had fear stolen from him already? How many opportunities disappeared while he waited for the perfect moment? The realization hit harder than any threat ever could. Future David leaned closer. If you want to make yourself proud in 2026, stop asking whether you might fail. A long pause followed. Ask yourself what happens if you never try. David felt something shift inside him. Not motivation. Not hype. Something deeper. Responsibility. Over the following months, David transformed completely. Not into a perfect man, but into an honest one. He stopped hiding behind distractions. Stopped shrinking himself to avoid disappointment. And for the first time in years, he felt alive. But fate still had one final surprise waiting in the shadows. June 18th finally arrived. David remembered every warning. Every message. Every terrifying clue. He almost stayed home all day. But then he realized something important. Living in fear was exactly how his old life worked. So he stepped outside anyway, unaware that within hours, everything would change forever. Rain poured across the highway that evening. Traffic slowed. David gripped the steering wheel tightly. Then headlights suddenly swerved across lanes toward him. Tires screamed. Metal exploded. Everything spun violently. And in the final second before impact, David remembered Future David's words, because this was the moment he had been warned about all along. Days later, David woke in a hospital bed. Bruised. Broken. Alive. Doctors called it a miracle. But as he stared out the window, he realized something terrifying. The accident happened exactly as predicted. Which meant Future David had been real all along. And one final unanswered question remained. A nurse handed David a small envelope recovered from his car wreck. Inside was a final message. No matter what happens next, you already won. David read it twice. Then he understood. Success was never about becoming famous or perfect. It was about becoming someone he could finally respect in the mirror. Months later, David revisited the old gym alone. The same dusty floors. The same silence. But this time, he felt different. Not because fear disappeared. Because he stopped letting fear control his choices. He looked toward center court and smiled quietly, until he noticed something sitting on the chair again. Another note. Fresh ink. David unfolded it slowly. You still have more to become. No signature. His smile faded slightly. Because the handwriting wasn't his. And it wasn't Marcus's either. Which meant one mystery still remained unsolved, and maybe this story was never truly over. Later that night, David sat alone in his apartment staring at the city lights. For the first time in years, he felt proud of the man he was becoming. But then his phone buzzed one final time. Unknown number. A single message appeared on the screen. 2027 will test you even harder. David slowly looked up from the phone. Who sent it? How much did they know? And was this only the beginning of something far bigger than he ever imagined? Because sometimes, the scariest mystery isn't who's watching you. It's who you become when you finally stop running.